Hi Molly, it's Mrs. Jansen, and I am so excited to be starting a new project with you today. We are going to be working on a project that is all about texture. And from the picture that I have up on the screen for you of some student artwork, we are going to be creating a project with a big winter bear that has a textured fur and a wonderfully patchworked and textured scarf. And then even our background is going to be textured. So the supplies you're going to need today are a Sharpie marker, a pencil, and the really huge sheet of paper that I had you pick up from school. You also will want some different paintbrushes, a container of water, and the brown paint that I sent home with you. You're going to be putting your paint in pallets and egg crates, or using the egg crate that I sent it in. These are dry, but we'll obviously be using our wet paints. So the first thing that we want to talk about, Molly, is what the word texture is. Texture is what the surface of objects are. So the surface of any kind of shape that you look at can have a texture. So I have a couple of items, and we want to talk about the different texture that each one of these has, even though they're all balls. So this first ball that I have, this is one of my drier balls. This has a bumpy texture. So I can feel it, and it's not smooth. It's not soft. It is bumpy and pretty hard. This ball, on the other hand, has a different texture. It's made out of yarn, and it's soft and squishy. The bumpy one kind of feels hard and sharp in my hand. The yarn ball has a texture that's soft, and it makes you think that, oh, I could wear something with that soft yarn, because it just has a nice smooth, soft texture. And then we have our Lego ball. So each one of these balls is different, but this ball is very hard. It doesn't squeeze. It has lots of different colors, but that's not what gives it texture. What gives it texture are all the round little bumps that Legos have that use to connect them together. That makes for a very hard and bumpy texture. And it has sharp edges, so that's a sharp texture. Whereas this, even though it's spiky and kind of bumpy, it's pretty rounded. This, on the other hand, is sharp. So every object has a texture, and sometimes it's really smooth, sometimes it's bumpy, sometimes it's soft. So this was a doll that Ava and I made during one of her birthday parties when she was younger, and I thought she was a good example of a bunch of different textures. So we have all these different visual patterns, right, that with the checks and the florals and the swirly tights, and then we have a really smooth, shiny texture for the shoes. These patterns, the cloth is still all smooth, so that doesn't change the texture. It's soft and squishy, but this is different. The shoes are, because they're hard and they're shiny. And then we have these hard little buttons on here that are smooth and shiny as well. And she has a matching one here. The texture of the rickrack on her dress is bumpy, and it's rougher than the super smooth cloth that we have for her dress or her arms. But then on her head, she's got a fuzzy texture hair, and then a really silky and smooth texture on her bow. What I would love for you to do is pause this video and go around your house and collect 4 different textured objects. So that could be like a pine cone. It could be berries. It could be something like my paper punch tool, which has like a bumpy texture and a smooth texture. It could be some Legos, some soft yarn or cloth. There are so many different kinds of texture. So go and collect 4 different kinds of texture and show your mom or dad what different texture looks like. All right? That it's hard or soft or bumpy or smooth or rough or gritty. You find some things. And then on Seesaw, I would love if you showed me a picture of the items that you chose that have different texture. The reason why we are talking about texture is because the paintings we are going to do of a bear in winter, are going to have a lot of different texture. And we are going to use paint and paintbrushes to make the fur on our bears look fuzzy, and the scarf to look soft, and the sky to either be snowy or have a patterned texture in the background. Texture is an important element of art. It helps to make contrast in projects so that they look nice and you can tell the difference between things. Now, when we talked about texture, like with these balls, I can feel all of these, but I can also see that they have different texture. I can tell that they are different even if I don't touch them. When we do a drawing or painting with texture, it's going to all feel pretty flat and smooth, but visually, we're going to make them look like they have different texture. I want you to grab your large sheet of paper. I cannot fit my whole sheet in this video. It's so big. So you might need to go to your kitchen table or work on the floor, somewhere where you are going to be able to stretch out your paper flat. So the first thing, you're going to need your paper and you're going to need a pencil. The first thing is we're going to draw the outline of our bear. And then we are going to be adding brown paint and doing it with texture so that later on we can do the background and the scarf. Molly, before we start drawing our bear, I wanted to show you a couple of pictures of some large bears so that we could get an idea of all the parts that we're going to be drawing. You can see this bear is very big and his face feels almost small compared to the rest of his body. But look at the texture of the water and of his fur, and his fur when it gets wet. Those are the types of things that we are going to be thinking about when we work on this. So you can see we've got cute small little eyes, his mouth, his snout and nose, his fuzzy little ears, and here of course you can see the water splashing. When we are going to be drawing ours, we are going to be trying to make our bear have the parts that a regular bear has, but maybe a little friendlier and lots of fuzzy texture like this teddy bear that I'm showing you a picture of here. So I want you to keep these images in mind as we start on our drawing. I want you to go to the bottom of your paper and we are going to take our pencil and I want you to draw basically an upside down U. Like I said, mine is so big. So that's my U, the scarf, and the way we're going to do the scarf is we're going to come up from our rounded upside down U, and I'm going to draw a square that's going to kind of go around the rounded U. So you can see my square isn't perfect. I'm just going to put And this was our patchwork one. This one's going to come a little bit below, but I'm attaching it. So I want you to put probably either 3 or 4 of those across your U, depending on how big your U is. Then we're going to go to the bottom part and we are going to add some more squares. This is going to be the rest of our scarf that's tucked under the scarf part that's wrapped around the neck. These would be the 2 tail ends. And we're going to do these like they're patchwork as well. The next thing that we're going to do is on top of our scarf, we are going to put our bear head in. So basically we are going to do another big U. So I'm going to start here on my scarf and I want to end up here. And I want to go, I can put a little mark up there. So it's like you're doing a circle, but you're not going to get the full circle in. It's going to stop at the scarf that we've drawn. We're going to do that again, but we are going to do it smaller, okay? And that's going to be for his mouth. And we'll do it one more time. And you can make the sides of this a little bit straighter if you want. That's going to be our nose. And we'll put a line down to the scarf. This is going to show his face. The last parts of the face are the eyes and the ears. So we're going to do our ears first because just like we made our half circle here, we're going to do that for our ears. So you'll just start on the top of his head and then you'll do it one more time so we have the inside of his ear and the outside. And then we'll do it on the other side too. Okay, so the last thing we're going to want to do is put the eyes in. We are going to draw circles. And if you remember the photos that we looked at, their eyes are pretty small and hard to see in their head. You can make your eyes bigger if you want to. So I've got some of our student work had really big eyes. So you can see I had mine bigger, but I decided I wanted mine a little smaller. So you should have 3 circles. 1 for the outside, 1 for the iris or the color, and 1 for the dark pupil. So there is our teddy bear with a winter scarf. That is the first part of the project. I want you to take your Sharpie and trace your lines. So if you like your lines and you're feeling good about them, I want you to go in and trace them on your paper. I'll remind you that Sharpies are permanent markers, so they do not come out of clothing. So you want to be careful. You don't want to write with them on the table. And you want to make certain that you just do it on the paper. So there's my bear face. Okay, so you're going to put your marker and pencil away and you are going to go get out those paints, the brown paint that I sent you with a little bit of black and white. We're going to use that for painting in his head and his body down here. Okay, so but before we do that, I want you to look at, this is my boot. This is one of my winter boots. And on the inside, you can see how this has a really fluffy, soft texture. We're going to try and paint, so our bear kind of has what looks like that fluffy texture. We have this really smooth part of the leather on the outside. That's more, we would have a smooth part of his face, but on the rest of it, we want it to look fluffy and soft. Okay, Molly, so you should have your big, huge drawing in front of you, and then you should have your paints. I want to remind you kind of what these paints are. So you can see I have a bunch of colors that you don't have. That's actually all dry from a different project that I worked on. I sent home for you brown, white, yellow, and black. Those are the colors we're going to use to make a brown textured bear. We will use the white and the yellow to lighten up the brown, and we can use the black to darken it. These paints, you will notice, are thick and different than your watercolors. And these are called what we call tempera paints. They are water-based paints. So if you do get them on the table or like part of your shirt or something you're wearing, they will wash out if you get them wet again. So you just want to be careful not to get it in a bunch of different areas, but you also want to not worry about it because they do clean up. So I'm going to get I have a bigger paintbrush that I'm going to use. I have a flat one. You can use whatever paintbrushes you have. I have this really big one. I don't know if I'm going to use that. We'll see. So you're going to be mixing your colors. I've got my brown, and you can see here is some dried up brown, so I'm just going to add a little bit of my brown over here. If you don't have room where your paints are, you can get a separate paper plate or plastic plate, and you could put some of the paint in there if you wanted to mix. I just added a little bit of white to this brown so you can see how that's changed this dark brown. It's gotten, it looks quite different. I'm also going to take a little bit of yellow and I'm going to mix that in there too. That'll kind of make it a little bit tanner. Add a little more. Okay, so we want our teddy bear. Whoops. Oh no. See, now I want you to see what I did. I got a little bit of paint on my scarf. I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm just going to wipe that up. So there it is. I actually don't want to waste this paint, so I'm going to dot it on my bear. We'll be painting over that, so that doesn't matter. So you're going to take your tempera paints, and I'm going to use my brush, see, and I want you to think about the different ways you can make texture. So when I put the paint on straight like this, and I'm just pressing the brush up and down, you can see the texture that is created on the paper. Now, if I take my brush and I smooth it all the way out like that, do you see how different that texture is? This looks much smoother. See? But I don't want my winter bear here to look smooth. So I want to press down again, and I'm going to make my bear look like he's fuzzy. So I'm going to go back and forth with my brush to make these marks. It's good to use some of the dark, and you can use that over the areas where you did the light, and you can use some of the lighter and mix that in. I can even use some of that straight yellow and go over it so it has some lighter spots, and I could do the same thing with the white if I wanted. So you can see all the different kinds of texture that the paint creates. This is how the paint is different than watercolor. The paint is thicker and opaque. Opaque means that it is dark and not see-through. You're not going to see light through it. Rather than transparent. Watercolor is transparent, which means you can see things through that paint when you paint on them. So you can see I've moved up on the ear and around it. I want to leave the inner ear by itself, because we're either going to paint that a different color or we're going to leave it white. We can decide that later. So you can see I'm just using my brush. I'm rotating it because you can get a lot of paint on the side of your bristles, like that. And you're just going to go around and you're going to add this kind of texture. Now your brush might be doing it different than mine. So you're going to make a bumpy kind of texture that looks soft and fuzzy. That means that even along the edges, some of it might come up over the edge. And see how this is a lot lighter? That means I might have to go over it again and add a little bit more paint. If the paint that you got from school was dry and you can't move it around very well, you just need to add water to it. So you can see what this looks like. I'm going to try, this is my flat brush, and I'm going to see, you can see it makes different marks. So if you have a flat brush, your fuzzy bear texture might be different than mine, like that. So you can experiment and see what you like best. So I want you to, you can pause this video. I'm just going to fast forward as I do all of the top of his head and fill it in with texture. I just want you to, as you do that, remember to keep adding your white and your yellow to your brown so that some of it is darker than other parts. Okay, you can see that I have all the top of my bear filled in. I would say if you find that you have any areas that look a little too light and they need to be darkened up and you need to add another coat of paint, you can go over the top of them once they're a bit drier. The next part that we're going to do, we're going to let this completely sit and dry. We want all of our little bumpy lines and lights and darks to dry so that our bear has this wonderful texture that looks fuzzy. And we are going to do the bottom part of his body. We are going to be doing that the same way that we did the top. There you have it. We have our textured, fuzzy bear painting. We did the bottom shoulders. We have the scarf that's left over, the inner side part of his face by his mouth, his eyes, and his ears, which you can see we have all of the brown texture. We're going to let this completely dry, and then next week we'll work on the rest of it. I hope you had a lot of fun, Molly. I hope you think about all the texture that you see when you go outside or when you're in your room. You notice all the textures that you are touching every day. So I look forward to seeing how your painting looks in progress, and I will see you next week.